So we had new news from Sony today about a new camera coming out, a crop sensor camera, and something that's been heavily rumored and things that have caught up. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to the actual event, all the way on the West Coast. I wasn't able to make it for some family things, and on the account, I wasn't invited. Yeah, so let's really talk about the Sony a5400, a6400. It's the 6000 line? We'll talk about that. Let's talk about the Sony a6400. The one big thing you get from this entire thing and the firmware updates for their full frame models as well is this whole autofocus, real-time autofocus, track autofocus, eye autofocus, and that's pretty much the biggest selling point within this new Sony a6400. But in this video, I'm going to cover a little bit of just the big specs. I'm not going to talk a ton about it, but then I really want to discuss where this stands and basically the issues with this camera and what is it really. So you're gonna be able to pre-order this bad boy in 2 days from watching this video, probably one day, January 17th, and it's gonna be $900 for body only, pretty much kind of getting rid of the a6300 in my opinion. The a6000 is still kind of out there as well because the price is lower, but it's a little bit older tech compared to what's in here, and it's got some great autofocus within this bad boy here too. So $900 body only, $1,000 with their standard really good kit 16 to 50 lens there as well. But you're looking at your similar 24 megapixel sensor. You're going to be able to get 4K video only at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 120 frames per second. So nothing really, jaw-dropping there. Like I said, this is their new autofocus thing, your eye autofocus, and from what they show, it actually looks very, very good, and I think it's very eye-catching. You got your 11 frames per second in continuous modes, your touchscreen, 425 phase and contrast autofocusing points, but the big thing is, for the first time ever, they brought in your 180-degree flip-up selfie screen, except it's been done before in their a5000 line. And there's a big flaw to it. We'll talk about that. But also going along back to the video points is that it's the first Sony crop sensor that will do HLG and proxy recording. So that's a really cool thing. That's a cool thing to have in a sub $1,000 crop sensor camera. Once again, the Fuji X-T3 really gives a lot. That's also $100 off right now, I think for about $1,300 at the moment. And you're getting a lot of packed in features with that. Except the big thing that we're missing here is the in-body stabilization, like I mentioned, I think, and that's basically what is keeping the Sony a6500 alive at this point, but at a bigger price tag. Besides the autofocus, AF, autofocus, you're also getting the older battery. Yikes! And it does have a little sexier matte finish on it. It does look really nice. And it definitely doesn't look plasticky like the old Sony a6000 did, which is still a great camera to this day in 2019. But it's borrowing the little bits and pieces and sharing some stuff from the bigger full-frame cameras, and the firmware updates from something like this is going to go into like the Sony A9, etc., to really kind of catch up with the whole autofocusing thing. But does this kill all a6000 cameras like I mentioned? Pretty much. But the in-body stabilization, like I said, keeps the a6500 alive for no reason. Sony, if you're going to put out a camera like this, just put out the camera with image and body stabilization. Everyone pretty much wants it. And once again, this flip screen, unfortunately, it's a great addition to have, but it's not new, and it's obviously targeted for the vloggers out there. But a lot of the vloggers want to mount mics a certain way. This flips up like a flip screen, like the Canon M6 does. And once again, it's not the first time they've done this on their Sony a5000 and a5100, cameras that are years old. They only shot 1080p. They overheated very quickly. They already had this, so this is nothing new. They're not developing any new research into getting a fully articulating side flip out screen. Seriously, Sony, if you would have brought me to the event, I'd be able to tell you a little bit here. Just do the screen. Put a little bit of more, research and design into the side screen. That will make people happy. The issue you get is you can't use a top mic because it impedes the view for the most part, especially the new Rode Video Mic Pro Plus mic or whatever is ginormous. Great lens, but it's a great mic, but it's ginormous and it blocks the entire screen. Pretty much the same issue I used to have when I had the M6. But I do have a video I'll link below on a mic connector and adapter and a mic that sound great. You mount it to the side and it points to you and it sounds phenomenal for what it is and is great for vlogging. You shouldn't have to have some contraption or some sparrow, Ted Forbes, even though it's a great idea, to vlog it. To vlog, everything's supposed to be easy. Run and gun, not mount it to this thing, to another thing to do it. That's not how this works. So if you want the fix for that, look at the link below for the things. They're not affiliate links. It's just me being helpful for stuff like that. But once again, they held back a little bit in that regards. It's basically should be, in my opinion, a Sony a5400. It seems like they really updated the 5100. So I'd love to see how the 4K is in this. Only at 30 frames per second, unfortunately, but I'd love to see how, if that overheats in regards, because in the 5100s, they have the problem of overheating at 1080p. So I'm wondering how that's going to be, because this camera has a lot going on, especially in the autofocusing range. I do really like what they're doing here. I love this whole autofocus, eye autofocus, and it being very accurate, especially for like wildlife and tracking and all that kind of stuff. I think it's great, and I think a lot of people who go mirrorless want this technology, and this is what a lot of people are wanting. And even Nikon recently came out with their updates at CES to say that they're concentrating on eye autofocus as well. So it's a big thing, I get it. The Sony a6400, I'd probably recommend to people. It's just tough because you don't have in-body stabilization. And the flip screen isn't the right flip screen. But if you don't use a mic, it's a very, very good camera to have. Once again, sub $1,000 camera. But if you're a vlogger, like a lot of people want, and who this is targeting, you're probably going to want some mic that you can mount on top of your camera. Once again, if not, check that link below. So we're still waiting on the Sony a7S Mark III. So I want to know your thoughts about the a6400 below. Is it something that really kind of breaks the mold for them? Do you think it really demolishes their a6000 line? Is the a6500 safe just because it has the image, in-body image stabilization? Or should this be kind of like the a5400, like I've mentioned? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Sony does keep innovating a little bit, but they're still making very interesting options here. Just, and 4K 30, come on, just release the cameras that people fully want and give us a actual flippy screen. The Sugar Magoya.